Hi guys, so what I'm doing here is I'm building a sort of a business intelligence application in LibreOffice Base, and the first step of this is to import some data from the Google keyword tool. I downloaded a CSV file, I guess called keyword planner something.csv, and I renamed it to import planner.csv. CSV stands for comma separated values, and it means each field in the data should have a comma between it. Therefore, when the text file is being written in or being imported into an application, the application knows where each column starts and ends. Problem with the keyword tool export is that although it's called a CSV file, it gives you a tab delimited file. And what I got was something like this. So if you look at the top file which says import planner, I'll just make it a bit clearer here. So if you look at the top file which says import planner.csv, that's what I got from Google. So we can actually see there's no commas there. Everything is separated by a tab. It looks like a space, but it's actually a tab. What I want to do is write a Python program that's going to read import planner.csv and create an output file called import planner clean.csv. And import planner clean.csv will separate, instead of having tabs, you'll have a comma. So for example, if we look at the first or the second line here, it says keyword ID is comma, LibreOffice comma, GBP comma, 1.2 million I think it is, etc, etc. Whereas in the other one, it says keyword ID is space, tab, LibreOffice tab, GBP tab, etc. The second file, import planner clean, with the comma separated values, is a lot easier to import into various applications, and that's the end results that I want. And in the following video you will see how I wrote the code to get us there. It's in Python, which is an excellent programming language which you can dovetail into any other application, and in fact I will later on be calling that file in from LibreOffice Basic macro code. Let's get to it. So I'm going to write a Python file that works on Mac computers. Most of the code here will work on all computers, except there's just a couple of things that are particular to the Mac. The first line, you will see this line is particular to the Mac, so here goes. This tells the Python interpreter how to launch the Python file. Now I need to import two modules into the Python file. So import OS stands for operating system. I need this module if I want to issue commands such as change folder. So i.e. I want to point the Python file to a certain directory or path. And the sys module, this is required if I want to call this program from the command line. And given we're going to use Python in order to help automate other processes such as Microsoft Office processes or LibreOffice Calc and Base or whatever processes. Within LibreOffice and within Microsoft Office, you can make a call to the command line in Microsoft Office. You use the shell command. In LibreOffice, I'm not sure off the top of my head which command, but there are ways of doing it. So by making this a file that you can call from the command line, it's extra useful because you can also call it from programs. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to create a function. And to this function, I'm going to pass the argument, which is the folder structure, the path to the file, and then the file name. The SZ is my way of denoting that the variable is meant to be a string as opposed to a number. So if you take this as being a crash course in Python, lots of programming languages such as JavaScript, etc. denote their functions using curly braces, such as open curly brace, close curly brace, like that. However, in Python, or for example, if you're in Visual Basic, you would denote the beginning of a function such as function, my function, and then you would do something like end function, and your code here. If you were also in VBA, you can also have sub, my sub routine, and then you would have end sub. Okay. In Python, the equivalent is to use indentation. So within Python, you denote a function by indentation. So let me show you basically. So first of all, OS, this is the call to the operating system that I've just imported, .ch change directory. I'm using the IntelliSense that comes with pycharm, quite a good piece of software for programming in Python made by JetBrains. Now, in addition to this, pycharm is roughly 70 to 100 pounds, I think, but you can get a free version which is very useful as well, and I have been using this up until recently, and it's pycharm.edu, or pycharm space pycharm edu. So if you go to the JetBrains website, you will see pycharm edu that you can download, and it is absolutely excellent. It's my favorite Python editor. In fact, a lot of the products JetBrains make are excellent. So here we go. I'm going to pass in the variable for path. So when you're calling this file from the command line, you would, for example, say you would, for example, type at the prompt process import for base.py space the path name and then space the file name, and then the path and the file variables will automatically be populated. When I put in some more code, you'll see why. Okay, so this command changes the path that Python is looking at to the path name that's contained within send path. Now, within other programming languages, you have the concept of an array. So in VBA, JavaScript, C++, whatever, you have arrays. In Python, they're called lists, and they're really awesome. So I'm going to call this LST. I use something called Hungarian notation, which means when I look at a variable, I want to know immediately what kind of variable it is. It just cuts down my workload. So list file. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to split the file into its before the extension component and after the extension component. In this instance, the file that I'm going to be working on, and in Python, if you want to do a comment, you put in the hash or the pound sign at the beginning of the line. So we're taking in a file called importplanner.csv, and what I want to do, I want to write a new import planner file that's actually separated by commas. But what I don't want to do is overwrite the original file. So the output from importplanner.csv will be called importplanner.clean.csv. Okay, or I could even say comma.csv. Okay, so what this split command is going to do is it's going to create a list which is similar to an array in other languages, and the contents of the list will end up being something like this: list file. Let me just comment these. I'll just make another comment line here. So it will contain something like list file, and the first cell will contain import planner, and the second cell, will contain CSV. Now obviously these will be in quotes because they're strings. So what I intend to do when I'm writing the output file is I will append clean to list file to this line. So it would be something like list file 0 plus clean plus, in fact it would be clean dot plus CSV. Okay, so if, for example, I was working with files that had lots of different extensions, I don't even have to put in CSV. I can keep it ultra flexible by doing list file 1. So what would happen here in this instance is I'm effectively inserting clean into the file name regardless of the base element of the file name and regardless of the extension. So the end result of that would be, and that is the particular goal of this. I want to write a file called importplannerclean.csv. So let's just delete all of this. That's my game plan with this particular line. Now, step 1 is I'm going to have to read the existing text file. So here we go. So I'm going to create a file object, and it's equals open, and the path we passed in, the file name we passed in, because now os.change directory is pointing this program to the directory that this file is located in. And I want to open the file for read access. Now, this gets a lot of people. When you're reading text files, the situation is that there can be lots of different encodings. And so you got, for example, and what encodings in a nutshell are, is that computer code has to assign binary items like 010101, etc. to letters. And for a long time you had, for example, just 128 characters, and then you've got 256 characters, and then you've got stuff like Unicode, which has a ton of characters, basically millions. So the problem that had to be solved was, in different languages you have different special characters. In German you have umlaut, and in French you've got acute accents and grave accents, etc. And all these have to be represented in computer code. So when a file is being written, if you have, for example, just 128 characters, you have to encode different ASCII codes to different meanings. So what makes this more interesting is I'm writing this code to work with LibreOffice Basic, and LibreOffice Basic I think just works with something like 256 characters. So we have to, I cannot use one of the expansive code sets such as Unicode, which basically has enough codes to cover nearly all languages. We have to use one of the simpler ones like ASCII. So I want to write text files that are available on all platforms. Latin 1 is a good cheat because if you're in the English-speaking world at least, and using European characters, Latin 1 should work in a lot of situations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the program that the encoding is Latin 1. The code should not throw an error when it reads this, because this will mean it should be able to read the file without throwing an error. So we've got a reference to the file here, but now as we iterate through the file, we need to place the lines. We're going to iterate and read over the file one line at a time. So I'm going to create a list, which is, as I mentioned earlier, an array in other languages. And here's how we create a basic empty list. I'm going to call it list input. So open brackets, square brackets gives you the list. Now I'm going to have to iterate over each line of the file. So here goes. So for, and I create an iterator variable, and I'm going to call it O for object line in file open, which is if you look up two lines, that's the object that just created. Functions and loops and if else statements in Python are terminated with a colon. And as again, notice the indentation. So everything that's indented here is going to be part of this for loop. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to read this code line by line. Remember, the line is tab delimited, so each piece of information is separated by a tab rather than a comma, which is what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, a list variable, and I'm going to call it list line. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to read this line into each separate element of the list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list in one line here, which contains each of the items that should be in separate columns. So here goes. So we go O line, because I'm reading the line. This is the object that refers to the line. And first of all, I want to replace any carriage returns, because I don't want carriage returns. And each line, the definition of a line is there's a carriage return at the end of the line, and the carriage return, the character encode for it is \n. And what that does is it forces a new line. And to keep things neat, I'm going to control the creation of the lines myself, so I don't want any line characters embedded in the code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say replace the new line character \n with a blank. So basically that deletes the new line character from the end of the line. In addition to that, now here's the piece of code that splits the line into an array. So what it's going to do is it's going to look at the line. Anywhere it sees a tab character, it's going to break that into a separate variable, box, unit. So in other words, it's going to chop up that line into separate elements and create a list. So from now on, instead of saying array, I'm just going to say a list. It's going to create a list object. So for example, if the line should have 7 elements and should have 7 columns, this list will contain 7 elements. So how you do that is I type split, and in this split, I'm going to say split it on tab characters, and the code for the tab is \t. Okay, so that's list line created. So when this has been read, a list representing each individual line is going to be created. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to add that list element to an array that represents the full file. So what I'm going to do here is list input dot append list line. So effectively what I'm going to have is I'm going to have a large list. If you think of a large list with a load of vertical cells going down, so the first cell of the list, cell 0 shall we say, because in computer code you count from 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3 so to speak. So list element 0 will contain this line, and then when the code reads the next line, list element 1 will hold the next line. What I'm doing is an ultra crash course and getting you up to speed on Python, so I guess you can Google some other items on this if it's not totally clear. But what's going to happen in reality is because I'm actually reading some files that I don't have control over the input, you're going to get characters in this code that are outside of the Latin -1 world, so to speak. And when that happens, the code is going to throw an error and it's going to fail. So I don't want that. So the next element I'm going to introduce you to right now is something called error trapping. And within Python, error trapping is done via try and except clauses. You also have try, except, and else, and finally. But for now, let's just deal with try and except. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in try, so try, and as again, this is a try block, so this particular error test is going to be valid for everything that's indented below it. So here we go, we indent that, and what I'm going to do is say if there's an error, except, and what I'm going to do is I want to log the error to the console so I know if there's any errors happening. So I'm going to type E for exception as E. And again, with most things in Python, try, for, if else, you finish it with a colon. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type print E. Now, what this is, in a nutshell, is when I type exception as E, I'm saying put the information about this error into the variable called E, and then when I say print E, it's going to print out the error. So for example, but it's not going to affect the execution of the program. So I'm typing print E, and then I type pass, and what pass does is it says, hey, this error is not massively critical, don't stop the program code, continue within the loop. And that's what I want in this instance, because for example, if there's this file, I want as much information as possible, but if a line happens to be unreadable, hey, I can deal with that. I'm still getting lots of information. I'm not reading a novel here, I'm reading an information file, and it's information I wouldn't otherwise have had, so I'll take whatever information I can get, basically. So there you go, an ultra crash course on exception handling within Python. And what I'm going to do also is, so this particular piece of this try block here is really only acting on this particular line here. So each time a line is executed, it's just working on it a line at a time. Okay, so let's just comment this up to make it a bit more readable. So it's the pound sign, and so these are just comments that I'm writing. They don't affect the code, they just make it easier to understand what's going on here. So now we will have created a list. So for example, if the file had 25 lines, list input would contain 25 rows, you could say, and within each of these rows are 25 cells. Within each of these elements of list input, you're going to have another list, which is all the cells that were within the line. I'm going to write list input out to a new file, but instead of having tabs spacing the line, I'm going to space it with commas. So step one is we no longer need the FO file object, of the object you're using to read the file. So I type FO.close. Okay, so if FO was for file open, but now I'm going to create a new variable to write the file, and I'll call it FW, file write. So equals open, and so as I explained earlier, we broke the input file. So if you look at line 7 above, we broke the input file into two parts. So here's where I write out the new file. So I type list file, which is the list, and I want the base element of the file. And what I want to do is we're ending it with clean.csv. So plus clean.csv. And I'm opening this file for writing. So you got to put a W in there. And bearing in mind that LibreOffice Basic, because I'm sort of chaining a number of processes together here, LibreOffice Basic, which is their equivalent of Microsoft Office's Visual Basic, if I'm reading files within that process, it tends to like ASCII encoding. So I'm writing a file here that most systems should be able to read. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to compact this code up a bit. That way I should be able to increase the magnification on this screencast. So now, here we go, for O line in, and we're working with list input, which is on line 19 above, in list input. So we're going to write out the contents ended with a colon. We're going to write out the contents of list input to a new file. So I'm going to create we're going to write it out line by line. So SZ write, I'll call it, so write line. Now, this is the interesting bit. So you saw, if you look at line 13, you call the dot split function, and you tell the dot split, the split function, that you're going to use a tab character, which is \t, to split the line into an array, a list rather. So remember, list input is a list containing lists. So each element of list input contains another list, and this list is the line of data from each line of the incoming file. So O-line is iterating over list input. So for O-line in list input means for every element in list input, do one iteration of the loop. So what we want to do is we want to join these back up because they're separated. Each element of O-line basically is the columnar data. So what we're going to do now is we're going to join all of that back together into a line. And between each element, I'm going to put in a comma. So I want to join everything with a comma. So what I do is I write out a comma. So because a comma is a string, you surround it with quotes. So comma, and this is weird because it's just the way Python works. In Python, everything is an object. So this piece of string is an object. So if I do the dot operator on it, and then I type join, and get this is like weird, O-line. Okay, so what I'm saying in this line effectively is get each element within the list O-line, join it with a comma, so you're effectively reading right to left in a way here, and then put that into the variable write line, as said write line. That's what's happening there. It's counterintuitive. So fw, which is the file I created on line 24. So fw.write, and what do I want to write? I want to write the line above, write line. I want to put a carriage return into the end of this line, onto the end of this line, so \n. Without this, the file would just be written as one long line. This \n would separate each of these items into a new line. And that's your loop. And to end the loop, we go back in, because as I said, everything is controlled by indentation. I'm tabbing, I'm not doing spaces here, and you need to tab within Python as well, because if you get your indentation off even by one character, it won't work. So now let's close the file. So it's fw.close. And this is the good thing about using something like pycharm. You've got IntelliSense. pycharm understands the language, so it makes it a lot easier. You just press your dot button, your period button, and you can see all your available options most of the time. And that is the code, that is the process. Now, on line 2, you will see that I also imported SYS, SYS, and because it's grey, that indicates that it hasn't been used yet. So what we want to actually do is we want this file to work from the command line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to issue a command, because I've put the code in a function, the function being line 3, where you see def process file and the first argument and the second argument. Now I want to be able to call this from the command line. So here's how we do that. So I'll type the name of the function, process file, and the sys object. So get this, the sys object helps with grabbing instructions given from the command line. So how we do this is sys, so for example, what we're going to do is at the command line, we're going to type the file name, process import for base.py, space, then the path, space, then the file. So in order to pick up the path, which is at position 1, because position 0 in this, for some funny reason, is the actual file name. So we don't need the file name. We're not interested in the file name, which is process import for base.py. What we want is the path. So the path is going to be at position 1. So as opposed to position 0, just got to keep hammering this. So sys.arg, argv. So the argv, I guess, property of the system object is a list, and in position 0 of the list is in position 1 of the list is going to be the first argument we pass, which in this instance is going to be the path, and in position 2 we'll have the second argument, and that is going to be the file name. So what actually happens is when Python is reading this code, it's going to read this here to know that, okay, this is where the Python executable is. So in order to run this file, we call Python 3, or the operating system will call Python 3, and then it will pass this file to Python 3 for processing. So it'll read down here, it'll realize this is a function, so it doesn't do anything until it gets to line 31, and line 31 is a command, and it's the command being the function name on line 3, and it knows to pass in the first argument that you type at the command line to the path variable, and the second argument to the file. So let's just save this. So I'm just going to save it now, Command S, and save it. On Unix systems, which is all Apple computers because they're Unix systems, to make this file simply executable, because there's two ways you can do it. At the command line, you can type Python, or in this instance Python 3 space file name, because what I'm doing here is I'm teaching Python 3. Or what I want to do is simply type the file name and not have to type Python 3. So here's how we do that. So we go to the terminal window, and if you're on a Mac system, how you get the terminal window, the simplest way is press the command and the space bar at the same time, and then just type terminal, and you see it comes up, terminal, and we get a new terminal window. So now here's how we make the file executable. Change mod 755, and it's done. So now we can run the file. Now here's how we run the code. To run your Python file, you press the period, then the /, and then the file name. Then the path to my file, and then I pass the file name, which is import planner.csv. And to make things a bit more interesting, before I actually run the file, let's put some diagnostics in here. Opening, and I'll put file name. Okay, and I'll put here file read, print. And what I'll put here is file read, and now I'll put print opening, and then I'll type here and save it. So now let's go back to our terminal window, and fingers crossed that this works. Let's just pull up the other Finder windows. So if this works, we should see a new file created next to this file here. And here we've got a lesson. So we've got I've made an error here on line 32. So let's have a look here. You can see that on line 32, I put in sysargs1, so I passed the directory into both the file name and the directory. So this should be arg2. If I save it, now everything should be good to go. So now let us try again. So let's see what happens. What happened there is, and this is a perfect example of what goes on when you're working with different character sets. The Latin 1 character set was able to open some data and read some data that the ASCII character set can't read. I want stuff in ASCII because basically for the application I'm doing, it's a sort of a business intelligence app. I'm really only interested in clear characters. I don't need any outlying language elements. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to code this such that if a line fails to print, it's no big deal. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to put in another try and except block. So try, colon, indent that, and in the case of an error, accept, exception as E, colon, print the exception. So what I'm going to do is print error on \n for a new line plus write line, because it should print OK to the console on write line, and then I'm going to put pass because I want execution to resume. So let's just save this and try again. Okay, so here we go. So you can see opening planner, import planner.csv, import planner.csv read, writing import planner clean.csv, and then error on, and you see it didn't like these characters here because they were not part of the standard 128 ASCII character set. You've got some interesting language elements there that Unicode would handle, but ASCII wasn't able to handle. And then we get the all done message, and as you can see here we have the clean file. So if I open up the previous file, so this was the original file, and what we have done is created a new file that looks like this. Okay, so you can see LibreOffice base create table. So you got keyword ideas and you got LibreOffice base create table, but here everything's compacted together but separated with commas. Okay, so although this file is being created to import data automatically into base, I think this particular tutorial has gone on long enough. So what I'll show now is the effect of copying this comma delimited text file that's import planner clean.csv into calc, which is a spreadsheet package that's part of LibreOffice and OpenOffice. Here goes, let's paste it. So when I go to paste it, I get this text import wizard up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select comma for comma delimited text. So you can see it's already within the wizard, put all the columns into nice columns, I guess. It's decoded the comma elements and put them into columns. So if I hit OK, we have data that's usable. And when the data is imported into the database, into a database table, it will look something like this within the table also. Bye for now. Hi guys, thanks for watching. BusinessProgrammer.com is about automating business workflows and providing business information. I tend to do that using technologies such as Microsoft Office, LibreOffice, Python, and various web technologies. If this kind of stuff interests you, get over to BusinessProgrammer.com, pop your name into the email box, click join, and I'll be sure to keep you updated with all the latest articles and free courses, etc. that I produce. Oh, and if at any time you don't want to hear from me anymore, just click unsubscribe and I'm gone. Bye for now.